Opening hook, sometimes the heaviest burden we carry isn't what we owe the world. It's what the world demands when we have nothing left to give. The afternoon sun hung low over Route 47, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. It was the kind of day that felt suspended in time, too quiet, too still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. A single car moved along the empty road. A faded blue sedan with a dented bumper and a prayer. Taped to the dashboard dot behind the wheel sat Denise Harper. She was 43 years old, though some days she felt twice that. Her hands gripped the steering wheel gently, careful not to press too hard on the worn leather that had begun to peel years ago. The car's engine hummed unevenly, a sound she'd grown used to, like the rhythm of her own tired heartbeat. Denise wore a pale yellow blouse, clean but faded from too many washes. Her hair was pulled back into a simple bun, a few gray strands framing her face. She didn't wear makeup. There was no time for that anymore. Her eyes, deep brown and soft, carried the weight of someone who had learned to endure quietly. In the passenger seat sat a small grocery bag. Inside, a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a jar of peanut butter, and a single apple. It was all she could afford this week. On the back seat, carefully folded, was her work uniform, a custodian's shirt with her name stitched above the pocket. She worked nights at the county hospital, mopping floors and emptying trash bins while the world slept. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. And Denise believed in honest work. She glanced at the dashboard clock. 4:15. If she drove carefully, she'd make it home by 4:30, rest for an hour, then leave for her shift at 6. The same routine, every day, for the past 7 years. The radio was off. She couldn't afford to replace it after it broke last winter, and truthfully, she didn't mind the silence. It gave her time to think, to pray, to remember. Her daughter's face flickered in her mind. Angela, 18 years old, bright-eyed and beautiful. Angela was away at community college, working 2 part-time jobs to help pay for books. Denise sent her every dollar she could spare, even when it meant skipping meals herself. "I'm doing this for you, baby," she whispered to the empty car. Just a little longer. The road stretched ahead, bordered by tall grass and a few scattered trees. There were no other cars in sight. It was peaceful, in a lonely sort of way. Denise pressed lightly on the gas pedal. The speedometer needle trembled, hovering just above 45 miles per hour. The speed limit sign had said 50. She was being careful, always careful. Then, in her rearview mirror, she saw it, a flash of red and blue. Her heart sank. The police cruiser appeared suddenly, as if it had been waiting just out of sight. Its lights spun silently at first. Then the siren chirped once, sharp and commanding. Denise's breath caught in her throat. She checked the speedometer again. 45. She hadn't been speeding. She checked her seatbelt. Fastened. Her registration sticker was current. She'd made sure of that, even though it had cost her 2 meals. What did I do? Her hands began to tremble. She guided the car slowly to the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The cruiser pulled in behind her, its lights still flashing, painting the inside of her car in alternating shades of red and blue. Denise turned off the engine and placed both hands on the steering wheel, exactly where they could be seen. She had been taught this, by her father, by experience, by a lifetime of knowing that even the smallest mistake could cost everything. The air inside the car felt suddenly thick. She could hear her own breathing, shallow and quick. Outside, the sun continued its descent. Indifferent. In the side mirror, she watched as the officer's door opened. Boots hit the pavement. A tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the dying light. And Denise Harper, who had survived so much, who had endured poverty and loss and exhaustion without complaint, felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Fear, Not the fear of guilt. She had done nothing wrong, but the fear of powerlessness. The officer's footsteps grew louder, crunching across the gravel, slow and deliberate. Denise closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. Please, Lord, not today. Part 1. The STUP. The morning had started like every other. Denise woke at 5 a.m. to the sound of her neighbor's rooster crowing through the thin walls of her rental home. The house was small, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a bathroom with tiles that had cracked long before she moved in. But it was hers, in the only way that mattered. She paid the rent on time, every month, without fail. She rose from bed slowly, her knees aching from hours of standing the night before. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet. She padded quietly to the bathroom, careful not to make noise. Old habits. Even though she lived alone now, she still moved through the house like a ghost. After washing her face and brushing her teeth, she stood in front of the small mirror above the sink. The reflection that stared back at her was tired but determined. She ran a hand over her hair, smoothing down the strands that had come loose during the night. You're still here, she told herself softly. That's enough. In the kitchen, she made a cup of instant coffee and ate half a slice of toast. The other half she wrapped in plastic and saved for later. Waste nothing. Her mother had taught her that on the counter sat a framed photograph, the only decoration in the entire house. It showed a younger Denise, smiling wide, her arm around a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. Angela. The photo was 10 years old, taken at a church picnic. It was one of the few truly happy days Denise could remember. She picked up the frame and traced her daughter's face with her thumb. I miss you, baby. Angela called every Sunday. They would talk for exactly 10 minutes. That's all Denise's phone plan allowed. Angela would tell her about classes, about her roommate, about the diner where she worked on weekends. And Denise would listen, smiling, pretending she wasn't exhausted, pretending everything was fine. I'm proud of you, Denise always said before hanging up. So proud. After finishing her coffee, Denise dressed in her work clothes and left the house. The morning air was cool and damp, the sky just beginning to lighten. She walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, waited 20 minutes, then rode downtown to the hospital. Her shift was long. 12 hours of pushing a mop cart, scrubbing floors, wiping down surfaces. Her supervisor, Mr. Calloway, was a hard man with little patience, but Denise never complained. She did her work quietly, efficiently. INVISIBLY. At the end of her shift, Mr. Calloway handed her an envelope. Your check, he said without looking at her. Denise nodded. Thank you, sir. She didn't open it until she was outside. The amount was the same as always, barely enough. After rent, utilities, and the money she sent to Angela, there would be almost nothing left. But she would make it work. She always did. That's when she remembered. Groceries. She couldn't put it off any longer. The bread was gone. The eggs were gone. She needed to eat something, even if just a little. So she walked to the corner store, counted out her bills carefully, and bought what she could. And now, hours later, she was driving home with that small bag of groceries beside her. She had been so close. But now, on the side of Route 47, with a police cruiser behind her and an officer approaching, Denise felt the fragile structure of her life begin to tremble. The officer reached her window and tapped on the glass with his knuckle. Denise rolled it down slowly. Part TW of the CONFLIC Raymond. Blake stood beside the car, one hand resting casually on his belt, the other holding a small black notepad. He was in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, with a clean-shaven face and eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming in the fading sunlight. He didn't smile. License and registration, he said flatly. Denise's hand shook as she reached for her purse. She fumbled with the zipper, her fingers clumsy with nerves. Yes, sir. Right away. She pulled out her driver's license, an old photo, taken years ago when she still had hope in her eyes. Then she leaned over to the glove compartment, carefully retrieving the registration and insurance papers. Officer Blake took them without a word. He studied the license for a long moment, then looked down at her through the window. Do you know why I stopped you, ma'am? Denise swallowed hard. No, sir, I don't think I was speeding. You weren't, he said coldly. But your left taillight is out. Her heart sank. She hadn't known. She couldn't afford to check. Couldn't afford to fix it even if she had known. I'm sorry, officer. I didn't realize. Ignorance isn't an excuse, he interrupted. A broken taillight is a safety violation. You're putting other drivers at risk. I understand. I'll get it fixed as soon as I can. I promise. He tilted his head slightly. As soon as you can? Or as soon as it's convenient? Denise didn't know how to answer that. She stared at her hands, gripping the steering wheel. Officer Blake walked slowly around the car, inspecting it. He crouched near the back, examining the broken light. Then he returned to her window. This isn't just a taillight, he said. Your registration sticker is faded. Your tire tread is dangerously low. And frankly, this vehicle looks like it shouldn't even be on the road. Tears pricked at the corners of Denise's eyes. Sir, I'm doing the best I can. I work every day. I don't have much. You didn't seem to hear her. I'm going to have to issue you a citation. A citation? Her voice trembled. How much? Officer Blake flipped open his notepad and began writing. For the taillight violation, unsafe vehicle operation, and failure to maintain roadworthy conditions. The total fine comes to $7,000. The world seemed to stop. Denise stared at him, unable to speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. $7,000. It might as well have been $7 million. That can't be right, she finally whispered. 7,000? For a taillight? It's not just a taillight, Officer Blake repeated coldly. It's multiple violations. And the law is the law. But I don't have that kind of money. I don't even have $70. He tore the citation from his notepad and handed it to her. Then I suggest you figure it out. You have 30 days to pay, or your license will be suspended. After that, if you're caught driving, you'll be arrested. Denise took the paper with trembling hands. The numbers blurred through her tears. Please, she whispered. Please, there has to be another way. I have a daughter. I have to work. I can't lose my license. Officer Blake's expression didn't change. You should have thought of that before driving an unsafe vehicle. He turned and walked back to his cruiser, his boots crunching across the gravel with the same slow, deliberate rhythm. Denise sat frozen in her seat, the citation clutched in her hands. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting the road in shades of gold and shadow. And for the first time in years, Denise Harper, who had survived so much, felt something break inside her. Part 3, the Estorgilist didn't move. She sat in her car, hands still gripping the citation, staring at the numbers that seemed to mock her. $7,000. The letters were printed in bold black ink, official and unforgiving. Behind her, the police cruiser's engine rumbled. Officer Blake was still there, waiting, perhaps to make sure she drove away, perhaps simply because he could. She folded the paper carefully and placed it on the passenger seat beside the grocery bag. Her hands were still shaking. Breathe, she told herself. Just breathe. The breathing felt impossible. Her chest was tight, her throat dry. She reached for the ignition, turned the key, and the engine sputtered to life. It sounded weaker now, as if the car itself had been wounded by the encounter. She pulled back onto the road slowly, her eyes fixed straight ahead. In the rearview mirror, she watched as the cruiser's lights finally went dark. Officer Blake turned and drove in the opposite direction, disappearing into the distance. Only then did Denise allow herself to cry out. The tears came quietly at first, just a few rolling down her cheeks, warm and bitter. Then they came faster, blurring her vision until she had to pull over again. This time, onto a dirt path beneath a cluster of oak trees. She turned off the engine and let the sobs come. Not loud, not dramatic, just the quiet, exhausted weeping of someone who had held on for too long. $7,000. She thought of her daughter, Angela's tuition, the rent, the electric bill that was already overdue. She thought of the jar hidden in her bedroom closet, the one where she kept emergency money. Inside was $83. Every penny she'd managed to save in the past 6 months. $83 against $7,000. It was impossible. Denise wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked out the window. The sky was turning purple now, the first stars beginning to appear. Somewhere, people were sitting down to dinner. Families were laughing. Children were being tucked into bed. And here she was, alone on the side of a dirt road, holding a piece of paper that felt like a death sentence. She thought about not paying it, about ignoring it, but she knew what would happen. Her license would be suspended. She wouldn't be able to drive to work. She'd lose her job. And without her job, she'd lose everything. What do I do? She prayed. She prayed harder than she'd prayed in years. God, if you're listening, please, show me a way. I don't know what to do. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird called out somewhere in the distance, but no answer came. After a long while, Denise started the car again and drove home. The streets were darker now, the houses glowing with warm light. She parked in front of her small rental and sat for a moment, staring at the front door. Inside, the house was cold and silent. She set the grocery bag on the counter and placed the citation beside it. Then she sank into a chair at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. Her phone buzzed. A text message from Angela. Hey, Mom. Just finished my shift. Miss you. Love you. Denise stared at the screen, her vision blurring again. She typed back slowly. Miss you too, baby. Love you more. She didn't mention the fine. She wouldn't. Angela had enough to worry about. That night, Denise barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible solution in her mind. She could ask for a loan. But from who? She had no family left. No close friends. She could sell something. But she owned almost nothing of value that she could ask her supervisor for an advance. But Mr. Calloway had already denied her request last month. Every path led to a dead end. By morning, she was no closer to an answer, but she got up anyway. She washed her face. She made her coffee. She went to work, because that's what Denise Harper did. She endured. Part 4. The Turning PO3. Days passed. Denise went through the motions of her life like a woman walking through fog. She worked her shifts, ate sparingly, and avoided looking at the citation that sat on her kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. She was mopping the hallway outside the hospital's emergency room when she overheard a conversation. 2 police officers stood near the vending machines, talking in low voices. One of them was younger, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes. The other was older, graying at the temples. You hear about Blake? The younger officer said. The older one shook his head. What about him? He's been under review. Internal affairs. Apparently, he's been hitting people with inflated fines for months. Some lawyer downtown started asking questions. Denise's mop stopped moving. She stood very still, listening. Inflated how? The older officer asked, turning minor violations into major ones. Stacking charges. There's a whole list of complaints. People who couldn't afford to fight back, so they just paid. That's messed up. Yeah, word is, he's done. They're pulling his badge. Denise's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to walk over, to tell them what had happened to her. But fear held her back. Instead, she finished mopping and hurried to the break room. She pulled out her phone and searched for news about Officer Raymond Blake, and there it was. A small article from the local paper, published just yesterday. Local traffic officer under investigation for excessive fines. The article was short, but it confirmed everything she'd overheard. Multiple complaints. An ongoing investigation. A legal review of all citations issued in the past year. At the bottom of the article, there was a number, a hotline for anyone who believed they had been unfairly cited. Denise stared at the screen for a long time. Then, with trembling fingers, she dialed. Part 5. The act of kindness. A woman on the other end of the line was calm and professional. Thank you for calling the Citizen Complaint Hotline. How can I assist you today? Denise's voice was barely above a whisper. I received a citation from Officer Blake. It was for $7,000. I don't think it was fair. There was a pause. Then the woman's tone softened. I'm very sorry to hear that. Can you tell me the date of the citation? Denise gave her the details. The date, the location, the amount. The woman typed something into her computer. Okay, I see it here. Ma'am, I want you to know that your case is being reviewed along with several others. Based on the preliminary findings, there's a strong likelihood that this citation will be dismissed. Denise's breath caught. Dismissed? Yes. It may take a few weeks, but we'll contact you as soon as we have more information. In the meantime, do not attempt to pay the fine. Do you understand? Yes, Denise whispered. Thank you. Thank you so much. When she hung up, she sat in the break room for a long time, her hands pressed to her face. Relief washed over her like a wave. But it wasn't just relief. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being heard, of being seen, of mattering. That evening, Denise did something she hadn't done in months. She cooked herself a real meal, eggs, toast, and a small portion of rice. She sat at her kitchen table and ate slowly, savoring every bite. And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope. 2 weeks later, she received a letter in the mail. The citation had been dismissed, completely. No fine. No penalty. Denise held the letter in her hands and wept. Not from sadness this time, but from gratitude. She called Angela that night. Baby, I just wanted to hear your voice. Mom? Is everything okay? Everything's okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. Part 6. The Arialization officer Raymond Blake sat in a windowless room at the police station. His hands folded on the table in front of him. Across from him sat Lieutenant Sarah Morales, a stern woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. Do you understand why you're here? She asked. Blake didn't answer. We've reviewed your citations from the past 18 months, Morales continued, and we found a pattern. Excessive fines, inflated charges, targeting individuals who couldn't fight back. Blake's jaw tightened. I was doing my job. Your job, Morales said coldly, is to enforce the law fairly, not to punish people for being poor. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of complaints. Dozens of them. Denise Harper, Morales said. $7,000 for a broken taillight. Does that sound fair to you? Blake stared at the name. He remembered her. The woman in the faded blue sedan. The one who had cried. The one who had begged for the first time. Something flickered in his chest. Guilt. I didn't think. No, Morales interrupted. You didn't, and because you didn't, you destroyed lives. Blake looked down at his hands. What happens now? You're suspended pending a full investigation. After that, we'll see. She stood and walked to the door, then paused. You know what the worst part is, Blake? Some of those people, they paid. They scraped together money they didn't have because they were scared. And you took it. The door closed behind her. Blake sat alone in the silence, and for the first time in his career, he felt the weight of what he had done. Part 7 Redemption or a 4GVS 6 months later. Denise was leaving the hospital after her shift when she saw him. Officer Raymond Blake. He was standing near the parking lot, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, and a plain jacket. He looked smaller somehow. Tired. When he saw her, he froze. Denise stopped walking. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Blake took a step forward. Mrs. Harper? She nodded slowly. He struggled to find the words. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what I did. For the fine. For everything. Denise didn't speak. I lost my job, he continued. And I deserved to. I was angry at the world, and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it. People like you. He looked down. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Denise studied him for a long moment. Then she said softly, I forgive you. Blake's eyes widened. What? I forgive you, she repeated. Because holding on to anger only hurts me. And I've been hurt enough. Tears filled his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Denise nodded and walked past him, heading toward her car. But before she got in, she turned back. Officer Blake? Yes, I hope you find peace. And then she drove away. Part 8. Moral Ian Dean G. Denise never saw Officer Blake again, but she heard, months later, that he had started volunteering at a community center, helping people navigate legal troubles. Trying, in his own way, to make amends. Life went on. Angela graduated from community college and got a job at a nonprofit. Denise continued working at the hospital, still mopping floors, still enduring. But something had changed. She no longer felt invisible, because she had learned something important, that even in her quiet, humble life, she had power. The power to forgive, the power to endure, the power to choose grace over bitterness. And that, more than any amount of money, was worth everything. One evening, as she sat on her small porch watching the sunset, Angela called. Mom, I'm coming home this weekend. Denise smiled. I can't wait, baby. I love you, Mom. I love you more. As the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Denise whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for wealth, not for ease, but for the strength to keep going, and for the grace to forgive. Because in the end, that's what mattered most.